I am here with Ron Cohen. Ron is a producer. He's been in the industry for 15 years, actually doing production for 15 years across a variety of film and television. And he's been in the industry overall for 20 years, including acting and doing his own business. Ron has worked with Green Slate on Queen and Slim, The Verge, and Go for Grandma. Ron, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Today, we're going to be talking about uncovering efficiencies in the production process. Ron, if you could maybe start just by introducing yourself.
I'm Ron Cohen. I jump around a lot. Honestly, I started, as you said, I started as an actor, then I was producing, and then I went back and I realized a lot of producers didn't know physical production, at least the guys that I was working under. And so I went back and started as a PA and went back up the ranks and so learned to line produce. And so I would say in the last 7 to 8 years, maybe even 10, primarily been line producing and then creative producing and sort of jumping back and forth between the two, which has been incredibly beneficial to know both sides of it.
A lot of moving parts have to come together to make a film, and a lack of efficiency can really turn into a ballooning budgets and deadlines missed. What parts of the production process, in your experience, is the most consistently challenging to turn into a well oiled machine?
Everyone says prep is gold, but it's actually true. Prep is gold. Like, not to be a cliche, because everybody says the film is made in prep, but it
Mm.
really is. It really is. Like, you sit with your team. One, obviously, you're hiring the right team, and I think it's crucial to hire the team that's making the same film as you. So, there are amazing production designers. But if you're making a $5 million film, some production designers haven't worked in that space in a long time. So maybe they're not the right person for that. Maybe they are. Same with grip, gaffer, costume. So I think there's two caveats, which is making sure everyone on the film is making the same film as you. And reverse, if you're making a $20 million film, people know how to work in the space you're in. And then prep, making sure that everyone sees the same film. And I tend to be obsessive about prep. I tend to have lots of boards and questions and meetings and ask 1,000 questions that are probably redundant. But I find the more you ask the 1,000 questions in prep and assume all the things that could go wrong, by the time something does go wrong, you've already kind of, whether you've planned for it or not, you're so well prepared, you're
Mm.
not thrown into a loop.
What's one experience you've had where things went sideways, and what did you do to solve for it?
I just shot a film in Istanbul and it was both incredibly difficult and chaotic and also an amazing experience. There was one day where we were shooting, we had kind of a limited day, and somehow the local crew lost our wardrobe trailer, didn't know where it was, couldn't get into the neighborhood. Our poor actress was stuck in a car and her driver was lost. Our picture vehicle, which was the first shot, somehow they didn't get it ordered. It was a literally chaotic mess. You sit with a team, you take a beat, you go, okay, let's solve where all these things are, and then let's move up other things, and which is what we did do. We had our actresses for the next sequence, so we flipped the day, basically. I think being prepared for that and kind of knowing, we kind of knew that it was a chaotic show, so we would bring people in a bit earlier and just sort of anticipate having to fix, not sitting around.
And when you bring so many different people into a project and you're talking about prep and the right people, there's bound to be conflict. What happens when team members have conflict, and how do you, as a producer, resolve it and keep everybody happy and productive?
I think there's a couple ways to set the tone. One, the director does set the tone, right? Your director is your leader of the show. So hopefully you're working with people that are kind. Sounds pat to say, but I think kindness is so important.
Mm.
And I think running the production with that in mind, there are no problems, there are just solutions, and let's figure it out together. We're not going to sit here, we're not going to blame people, we're not going to get into this sort of pettiness. Like, we have a job to do and let's do it, and let's do it well. And things are going to go wrong. Sometimes they're going to be our fault, sometimes they're not. But there's no benefit in obsessing about the problem, which I've done too. I've learned this over the years. You spend 20 minutes focusing on who did this and that, and that's a waste of time. So I think setting the tone as a production company, as the director, as the producers, as the line producers, this is an environment of, we support each other, and that sets the tone ahead of time, so that when there is that conflict, which it will happen, you're also sort of setting the environment of the work that you guys are in. Something did happen when we were shooting recently. There was two people that were pretty head to head, and we sat them in a room together, which at the time didn't go so well. Uh, and then we spoke to them individually. And I think, here's what I'll say. I think what it didn't go so well, and we were sort of like, ooh, maybe we shouldn't have done that. But what we made a priority is to sit with both of them, hear what their problem is, listen to it, try to solve it as a team. And actually, those two individuals ended up becoming pretty close eventually. I think people just want to be heard, and understood. And if you're good at your job, you do that.
When you're conceptualizing a film, what are the steps for determining if it will be a viable project with hurdles that are worth jumping over? And especially if you're considering, like, oh, should I take it international or keep it US?
Not to make an obvious statement, but script is gold. Like, do
Mm.
you love the project? I find for me, and it's a bit of a obsessive thing, but film is sort of like a relationship. Like, okay, we're going to be married for the next 4 to 5 years, and that's in a good day. So, like, is there this something that you're so passionate about that you're going to, whether you're a producer, a line producer, probably in those two positions, you're on it for at least 2 to 3 years without batting an eyelash trying to put it together. I'm on a film now that we've had financed twice, and it's been 4 years, and it's been, cast not cast, cast not cast, and we've looked all over the world for where to shoot it. So I think one is, do you love the script and the team, right? Because the other piece of it is, there could be a project. I mean, the film that I'm producing right now is a perfect example. The script as it was more expensive than we could afford, but we had a great team on it. So we all got in and we worked on the script, and there was a flexibility of like, how do we make the film we love without losing the core of what we're trying to say, but financially be responsible for what we can actually afford to make this for, the cast that we have, the concept that it is, the genre that it is. I think it's this sort of balance of like, is everyone willing to get in and get a bit dirty and figure out how to make the film for what makes sense, because you have to be responsible financially, obviously. And then it is, as you said, it's looking at like, okay, where can we make this? Everyone obviously is after tax incentives. It's just the world we're in. So you look at everywhere in the US that makes sense and where can you shoot it. You always look at Canada and where can you shoot it. And then, like on this film that I'm thinking of, we're looking to shoot it in Iceland. But actually, it's because we looked at Iceland initially financially, but it ended up being location wise insanely amazing for what we wanted to do. Financially, actually, Iceland's more expensive for this particular project. I can't speak to other things in Iceland, but for what we were trying to do, actually it was coming in higher than, we were looking at Alberta as well. But we found this incredible like remote farm surrounded by like snow-capped mountains with a long road in, and it was a piece of the film.
What would you say some of the biggest benefits and drawbacks there are to taking a production outside the US, especially when it comes to efficiency?
We have amazing crews here, just amazing. I mean, throughout the US, and they're very good. They've been doing it for a long time. They're very efficient. And I mean, even from like, if you're making $1 million film to a $20 million film to a $50 million film, there are great crews within every one of those budget ranges. There are great crews overseas in the places that people are shooting quite a bit. Those crews are getting better and better. But when regions like Saudi Arabia open up, or Turkey, there are still great crews, but they're also sort of an emerging market. Saudi Arabia specifically is an emerging market. So you're going to end up bringing a lot of people in. Sometimes the savings you've gained, it's not one for one. You're still gaining savings, but you're going to lose a chunk of that in just travel, a lot of travel. So I think part of it is crew based, which is the same in the States, right? You go to New Orleans or New Mexico, there's probably X amount of crew until you're running into problems a bit, having to find. I mean, I know in Georgia 2 years ago, people were flying in like buyers because it was so busy. So like, you're in Georgia, you're getting the tax incentive, but you're still bringing in everyone because it's so insanely busy. You can't find local crew. Part of it is crew and experience, and there are plenty of experienced people outside the United States. Part of it is talent. It's hard to try to tell someone, hey, we're going to shoot this great film. Maybe we're only making it for $5 million. Oh, by the way, we're going to shoot it 30 hours from your home. I mean, that's a hard sell sometimes. On the flip side, you're asking like tax incentives. I haven't shot a lot in Europe, but I can say that the subsidies are much more robust, in terms of supporting independent film, and, the way you can piece a film together in like Germany or France. There is this sort of support of the arts that sometimes makes it a little more easy to make films, but even then it's getting hard. But their subsidies are very beneficial. Sometimes the things are just cheaper than they are here. And those are all things you have to have conversations about. I mean, I have seen a number of shows that like are set in Miami, and it's clearly like South Africa, or I think a friend of mine shot a film that was supposed to be in Miami and they shot it in Greece. And I grew up in Miami and I was like, that is definitely not South Beach.
You might be able to afford a bit more if you're substituting that location for Greece, Miami.
You can put more on the screen. I mean, the film we just shot was an Arab language comedy. So we shot Turkey for Turkey. We shot Saudi Arabia for Saudi Arabia. But I will tell you that film, even so, with all the things we did, I mean, we did a car chase through the streets of Istanbul. I mean, we did a lot of amazing things. And to the credit of the crew and the company, they're like, they made it all happen. And it would have cost a lot more money to do those things here than it did there.
What are some of the things that you might see along the way that would make you second guess whether or not that project would be worth the effort that you're going to put into it?
Look, I think the team on it makes a difference. I've walked away from enough projects projects that I was madly in love with, and this comes from experience because I've spent 4 years on things where like the team doesn't see eye to eye and but you're like, oh, we're going to make it work. And it didn't. And I've now since learned, and actually from, colleagues that are mentors, I've watched them and I've always admired them. Like they're so quick to be like, no, that's not going to work. I'm not going to, they say no to projects more than they say yes. And I've always been like, wow, that's so easy to, but now having been beaten up enough, I understand why, right? Because it's like you can have a great script, but if it's the team's not all on the same page, that's going to catch up to you eventually. Whether it be the director or the writer or the producer or the studio, if they're not all seeing the same, sometimes it works, but often it's tough, or the quality of the project could suffer. That's one. And then there's always a financial conversation. Like there are scripts that are incredible, but they just can't be made for under a certain amount, no matter
Right.
what you do. And it may not make sense to make that film right now because you can't make the numbers work. So sometimes you're putting that on a shelf and saying, hopefully we come back to this in a couple of years. The film costs this, but with the genre and what we're making, I can't look at a financier in the eye and say, yeah, no, I feel like there's a business plan here that makes sense. You're hopefully always being responsible about that as best you can. I mean, no one can predict the future.
We're seeing a lot of movies these days be made for not very much and doing exceptionally well, and getting a lot of attention.
My favorite films these years are like are the small indies. My hope is there's this resurgence of indie film because not because I love the bigger films. Well, I watch them, I enjoy them. I find with indie films, if everyone's on the same page, it has to be a great script because it's the only way it's going to make its way out in the world.
When it comes to production accounting and payroll in particular, as a producer, what are the main factors you look for in accounting and payroll software for your production accountants?
Unfortunately, this is going to sound like an ad for Greenslate, but I was doing Strangers 2 in accounting because it was right when they were introducing like online paperwork. What I appreciated about them at the time and the payroll companies, it was always forward thinking. In my experience, it was one of the first companies to go, let's do paperwork online. Let's do petty cash envelopes online. And it's just gotten better and better and better. So I think for me, it's about, are we making the job of the accountant easier? Are we making the job of paperwork collection easier? Are we making the job of cost reporting easier? Are we taking all these things? I mean, obviously, COVID made online just mandatory. I think the seamlessness of those systems is really important. Like accountants' jobs are really hard. It's stressful, it's intense, it's a lot of paperwork, it's a lot of time cards. So I think, especially now, having sort of a fluidity between software and that fluidity between like accounting, line producing, and being able to sign paperwork and be able to submit their paperwork or submit their petty cash or use the cachet. I think that interconnectivity is pretty crucial because it makes things smoother and it makes it so you're not chasing your tail on where things are at. Innovation, I think. And also for me, the other huge piece is, can you get somebody on the phone when there's a problem? Because there are a handful of companies that you can't, or you get someone on the phone and they don't really know the software or accounting. And you're like, I should know more than you. I'm calling you to help me. Being able to get someone on the phone and go, hey, we're in trouble. We need help here. I can't remember what the film is, but somehow we had gotten a workers' comp thing and Film LA hadn't accepted it. And I was able to get someone on the phone within an hour. And I think it was Friday night. And I was like, I need this solved because I'm shooting and I need a permit. And that was a huge, gracious moment that someone did get on the phone and they did solve it and they did help us.
Ron, is there anything else in the process of uncovering efficiencies in the production process that you would want to share?
To me, it goes back to prep and also the crew you've hired. I think, especially department heads, hiring department heads that are kind of better at their job than you, they will often save you. I've been saved by my coordinator 1,000 times where they're like, hey, did we do? You're like, oh my God, I forgot. Sorry, thank God. Or a wardrobe person who's just more ahead of you, or when you're in a bad spot, they're going to help you find solutions. I think the crew that's on there, being able to have a team where you can go to them and say, we have X amount of dollars. I need your help. We need to figure it out. I've had some great crews. I think it was like Robert F. Kennedy that was always like, you got to hire people better than you. And it's been a model that's stuck in my head. It's like, just hire people better than you. I had this key grip that I loved. And like, I always knew when he asked for something, he needed it. And I would always give it to him. And so having that sort of trust between them, it's like, if you're coming to me and saying, look, I need 4 more guys for a rigging tomorrow. And even if I'm on a tight budget, like I know if he's telling me he needs it, he needs it. And my job is to have enough padding and prep to plan for those emergencies. My job is to keep the budget in control and keep it tight and know enough with my crew where there's crew members like, I need this. And it's like, well, maybe you don't. But if you have a great crew, then they're not going to come to you with that until they need it.
What's a quality that you look for in a department head that helps you determine or assess that they're going to be fantastic for what you're hiring them for?
Probably a combination of roughly three things, which is one, creativity and experience. Are they creative and do they have the vision for what this particular project is? And that often happens in the meeting with the director and the thing. Like it's happened more than once, like where a DP will come in, with a book and say, "This is how I see this," and that's it. You're going to interview 10 other DPs, but that's the person. They just get the film. Two is, are they in line with the kind of film financially and visually you're trying to make? If we're making a $10 million film and they are, and it's happened recently, just a higher NDP who's made 30, 40, 50, it's like they may not be the right person. They might be, but they may not know how to work in that more confined realm anymore. And that's okay. That's a great problem to have. So I think making sure that they are in line with, like, can we all agree that, we're limited to this amount of budget and how are we going to make the film look incredible for this? And like, we may not have the money for 3 cranes for that sequence. Maybe we only have 2. Maybe we don't have money for a crane. Are you going to get in there with me and figure out, and the director more so, and figure out how do we do this together? I think that, and going back to kindness, I don't believe you have to be yelling and screaming and treating people badly. And we hire people that are going to be kind to other people because the job's hard. When things get hard, you want your department heads to be leaders to their team as well. It shows up on the screen either way.
What is one thing that you learned in your producing career that you wish you knew earlier?
This isn't my quote, it's Greta Gerwig's. And I don't know if it was her quote or someone else, where she said, filmmaking is not this perfect scenario that you had and the plan and the thing, and then things get in the way, and it's like, oh God, this got in the way of the scene I was going to do, or this got in the way. It's like the things that happen are the film. And it was such an interesting perspective shift. And it happened to me on a job where, like, I got a call at midnight. We were supposed to be in a location at 6, and the location guy's like, your location guy didn't drop off a check. You don't have a location. Don't ever call me, quick. And you're like, okay, I can now call my location guy and yell and scream, and I'd probably be in my right to say, this is your job, what are you doing? Or I can say, I have to solve this, it's part of the problem, and I'm just going to solve it. And I think that slight shift and that idea of the film is all these things that happen along the way. And I kind of love that perspective of, if you're always approaching things with, this is just a part of the journey and we will solve it. We have to solve it. Let's just figure it out. The job kind of becomes magical because it does always sort of work out. So if I had learned that sooner, I probably would have had a lot less panic attacks along the way.
Ron, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. A lot of great information here. Productions are not easy, I think is a bottom line. But if you have the passion, if you have the will and the right people who are working with you, you're going to be in a much better position to have a successful film in the end. This has been great. And thank you again.
Thank you.